Welcome to the Takeoff Podcast, the go-to construction podcast for construction professionals seeking inspiration, education, or motivation for the next steps in their career. Each Monday, you'll be joined by me, Mick Donaghy, Managing Director of Gedden Executive Recruitment and a respected name from the industry. A construction leader, a business owner, or someone in the thick of the action. The whole premise of this podcast is for you to get something from it. An idea, a connection, a mentor, whatever it is, I hope you get it. And I hope you enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Takeoff Podcast. Today we're joined by a guest that I've been connected to for a very long time. He's a connector of people, a lifelong advocate for the world of BIM, and a recognized leader in this area of the market. Today we're thrilled to have Ralph Montague with us. Ralph isn't just a qualified architect with a rich history of managing large-scale projects. He's a true authority in the world of BIM, building information modeling. From his beginnings at the University of Cape Town to leading significant developments in Ireland, Ralph's deep interest in technology and efficient systems have led him to co-found ArcDox, a specialist BIM practice. Alongside that, Ralph is also the co-founder of BIM Heroes, an online BIM community that we're going to discuss a little bit further today. And on this episode, we're going to deep dive into Ralph's career in architecture, design, construction, and BIM more specifically. Ralph, thank you for joining us. Do you mind giving us a little bit of an introduction to who you are, what you do? I never feel like I can do it justice.
Yeah, thanks, Mick, for having me on the show. I think you've you've done a great job already yourself of introducing me. But yeah, I suppose I'm originally from South Africa, but been living in Ireland for 25 years now, and an architect, practiced as an architect for 15 years of my career, and then for the next 15 years been specializing in supporting information management, or what most people would call BIM, on projects. So in a consultancy role, so advisory, support, production, training is what we do. And I suppose my my interest and passion is the making the connection between information and how that relates to the physical environment, the built environment, and you know the we trying to drive better processes of information management to create a more productive, safer, more sustainable way in which we build. So that's kind of what we do.
Awesome. Ralph, do you mind taking me back then to, your early days in the architecture world, the design world? You mentioned you're originally from South Africa. I would love to hear more about that sort of origin story of how you got started.
Yeah, well, I suppose I've always had an interest in how things are made, and I suppose that's what probably led me to architecture, to the study of architecture, I mean, it's a long career now. It's 30 years. So like when I started, we were still working on drawing boards with pens and paper, and so I'm really showing my age now. But you know, the role of architects and engineers is to describe a building or piece of infrastructure through information, and that information then gets translated into something physical by contractors. So I've always been fascinated by that connection between the production of information and how that information translates into something physical, and and then the quality of the information. And so, I mean, that's kind of what drove me through the years to look at technologies. So starting with CAD and computer technologies, and then eventually to BIM, and not BIM as just a technology. I suppose my interest is more in BIM as a process of a way of generating and managing information to achieve better outcomes on projects. So that's what we're advocating for. the construction industry has been quite slow to adopt all the technologies that are already available, and in general compared to other industries, and um, and it's a very inefficient industry. So yeah, if I just often use the comparison of manufacturing, but if you look at manufacturing, everything gets cheaper. Like, 40 years ago, it was very difficult for people to own a car or a computer or anything like that. But now just about everybody can afford that, because manufacturing has become far more efficient at producing stuff, and so it makes it more affordable. But you can't say the same thing about buildings. So not everybody can own a building or have a house, or have a school, or have a hospital. So buildings haven't got cheaper and quicker. The productivity hasn't really changed. So it's still very slow. It's very expensive, and it's quite dangerous. So people get hurt and killed, and even die. And so I feel there's definitely room for improvement in the way construction works, and technologies and better processes are the way into that improvement.
So, as someone who has, I guess, spent, a large chunk of their working career within or specializing in BIM, can you describe to me what BIM is, Ralph? Because, as you said, it's a process, or rather than a product. And sometimes I think, you know, there's people in the industry that look at BIM as being something that they buy rather than
Yeah,
something they buy into, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, that is part of the problem. Is obviously there's a lot of software vendors that are selling BIM. Well, I mean, they're
Yeah.
trying to sell their software product, and so the marketing around BIM is very technology focused, and that's part of the problem. Is people, they look at the technology and they think, well, it's not something I need for my job. If I'm a project manager or a quantity surveyor or a client, or like that, they don't immediately make that connection, and so they dismiss it before they've even looked into it. But I think the best way to describe it is, in before BIM as a process, the way architects and engineers would describe buildings, it would be through a series of documents. So 2D drawings, specifications, bills of quantities. These documents try to describe the building that had to be constructed, and in a sort of abstract way. And then contractors would take that information and go and try and build it. But so they were translating that abstract information into something physical on site. But then, of course, the lack of understanding and misinterpretation of the information created problems, and the problems then had to be resolved, and they translated into delays and disputes, and all sorts of challenges which we're used to in the industry. And but you could say that those challenges, the root of those challenges, is in the quality of the information, or the understanding of the information that was being produced. What BIM does that's different is you basically assemble the building in software, as in a digital process. So you kind of constructing the building, or piece of infrastructure in software, to make sure it's all going to work and fit together in 3 dimensions. It's The three-dimensional aspect is important, because you know we the built world is a three-dimensional world. We live in a three-dimensional world. Everything has a length and a breadth and a height, and so a spatial relationship. And so by constructing it in the software, you can resolve a lot of the problems that used to be solved on site before you get to site. And that is significant, because trying to resolve a problem on site is the most expensive, most disruptive, and most dangerous place to resolve it. If you can resolve that challenge before you get to site, it's quick and it's cheap and it's easy. If you're doing something in software, you're not spending real material, you're not putting real people's lives at risk. It's so BIM as a process is to effectively build the building twice. Build it first in software and make sure everything works and fits, and then build it again on site without all the usual problems that you would normally have. So it's a complete change in mindset, um, and then it opens up doors to so many opportunities. So, for instance, I think you have a background in quantity surveying, but you can quantify everything in that digital version of the building, so you can count all the elements and the quantities, and very quickly using digital technologies and get more accurate cost analysis. In terms of planning, you can look at the logistics of when things are going to arrive and be assembled together over time, so you can add the element of time, and that means you can really work out the program of how the construction is going to work before you actually get to site, so that you can work out the logistics and the procurement and everything. And you can also perform very sophisticated analysis on how the building will perform before you even construct it. You can work out whether the structure is going to perform in certain conditions, how the building envelope is going to perform from an energy point of view. um, so you can really test the end product before you build it. So the added benefits are extremely valuable for the outcome, and it's turning it more into like a manufacturing process where you know what you're going to build before you build it. Like, if you think of a manufacturing, imagine a production plant with a car going down a production line. I mean, they're not making decisions about where the parts are going as it's going down the production line. Like, all those decisions are made.
Yeah.
That part that you're installing is going exactly where it was intended to go. In construction, we do it the other way around. We sort of send plumbers and electricians and carpenters to site, and then they're figuring it out as they're going along. And then and then somebody makes a mistake, and the next guy comes along and he can't install his piece of ductwork because the previous guy put a piece of cable tray in the wrong place. And, like, the we really need to change the mindset of the way we construct things, and the technology is important. So the technology is allowing us to do that in a digital way before we get to the physical.
So in order for the BIM process to be most effective, then Ralph, so does that mean every I guess stakeholder within the project will need to have some sort of I guess a setup to be able to work on that 3D model? So for example, I'm thinking of consultants, architects, subcontractors, you know so would they need to utilize a specific software, or does everyone need to work off the same type of system? Like, how does
Yeah.
that look like?
Well, it is a digital process, so anyone who's creating information has to do that in a digital way rather than an analog way. you know, um, it's not a particular piece of software. I mean, there's different software that does different things, but you have to work together. So imagine an orchestra. Um, like, you have all these different instruments, violins and drums and trombones and whatever. Like, you all come together, but you have to coordinate and play the same song at
Yeah.
the same time, and so much more than you had to before, where you just produce your documents and you throw them over the fence, and hope that the next person knows what to do with them. Um, you're actually having a conversation beforehand and saying, okay, well, I'm the architect and I'm going to be producing my information this way. You're the structure engineer. We got to do this in a way that we can bring our information together and coordinate it and resolve it in this digital environment. and you're the mechanical and electrical services engineer, and you're the quantity surveyor, and so everybody has an instrument or a role to play in this symphony, and you got to figure that out at the beginning. And so the process is really important. You have to establish a plan of action, or what's called a BIM execution plan. So
Mm.
you've got to basically document how you're going to work together, the standards you're going to use, the procedures you're going to use, um, before you do the work. Um, so that's not new. I mean, I think everybody's always had to sort of sit down and coordinate, but I think we have to coordinate with much more intensity now, much earlier than we did before. The kind of mindset in the industry was, well, I'll produce some information and good luck to the person down the line. Whether it's useful to them or not, that's not my problem.
Yeah, that's true.
um, like um, I always joke is that when I was practicing as an architect uh, for 15 years, I never once asked a quantity surveyor what information they actually needed and whether the information I was producing was of any use to them. You know,
Mm.
I just sort of gave all my information to the quantity surveyors and sort of waited for 4 weeks and then got a bill of quantities back. And they could have been struggling on the other side and never have said a thing. But once we got into this idea of collaboration and around digital information, well, we had to have these conversations. So I had to actually sit down with the quantity surveyor at the beginning and say, well, I'm going to produce some information, but I need you to be able to take that information and extract the quantities very quickly,
Hmm.
not in 4 weeks. I want you to do it in like 4 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order for that to happen, what do you need from me? Like how must the data be structured? How must I transfer it to you? Etc. And so we had to have those conversations, and not only with quantity surveyors, with structural engineers, with services engineers, with sustainability um, experts that were going to do performance analysis, etc. So it it's not one software. Um, there's many pieces of software that do many things, but you do need to be able to transfer the data from party to party.
And so, who leads the whole BIM execution plan, Ralph? Is that the client or the architect? Who actually takes ownership of that?
Yeah, in the ideal world, the client will initiate the process because ultimately uh, the delivery team is working for the client, and that they'll deliver what the client asks for. So if the client doesn't ask for a BIM process, um, then it's much easier for everybody just to revert to what they know and go and not follow a more structured process. So whereas if the client, the person who's paying, is saying, I want you guys to work in a more structured digital way, following these international standards, um, then they're more likely to do it because
Mm.
it's the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules. um, so in the ideal world, the client is driving the process, but of course the client is not producing the information. They rely on their delivery team. So in the design stage, normally the architect is, as the lead designer, would drive the process for design. But once it gets to construction, the main contractor is usually driving the production of the construction information. So it changes as you go through, and eventually when you get to handover, somebody's going to take over the operations and facilities management of that facility, and they're going to take over so it goes in these phases. It starts with the client sort of initiating the process, the design team sort of organizing the design information, off to construction, who are producing all the construction and fabrication information, and then hand off to operators and facilities managers, who are then going to continue to maintain that information as they go through the life of the building or infrastructure. So you can see there's a lot of coordination to happen.
Yeah,
uh,
there's a lot
um,
involved.
yeah, and part of the problem is the people, like the operators, the people who operate and maintain facilities and assets, are usually not around when the design is happening.
Yeah.
So that means that the client and the design team have to anticipate the needs of future contractors and future operators
Mm.
when they're initiating this process. So which means yeah, you really need people who understand how buildings and infrastructure work, not only in design but in the final life of that building.
Are there any examples that you can think of, Ralph, that have been real success stories, in terms of utilizing the BIM process?
Um, well, I suppose in the 15 years we've been doing this, we've been working on many projects, but I suppose the success of those has been different. So depending on the team that we're working with, sometimes the success is in design stage, but then once it gets handed over to contractors, they don't continue the process, and
Mm.
so the long-term success. But I mean, for us, some of the success stories have been we worked on the ESB new headquarters building in Fitzwilliam, which is a significant development in the centre of Dublin that used this process. So that was that was a really interesting project because they initiated it um, probably not at the right time because they'd already completed the design when they initiated the BIM process, but we managed to convince to get everyone on board, and that continued through construction for shell and core and the fit out, and that's been handed over to the facilities team now. So that's it's really exciting to see. So we've had like probably 10 projects that have done quite well through the process ourselves. But in terms of bigger successes, I suppose the UK has been probably the prime example for us to look at in Ireland because the UK government initiated a mandate back in 2010, and they basically gave the industry 6 years to prepare. So by 2016, all centrally procured government projects had to use this process, and and the in terms of looking at the whole life cycle and the contracting methods and everything, there's been a lot of excellent work through. There was a research centre set up in the UK called the Centre of Digital Build Britain, which tracked and monitored and reported on the progress, and probably the best um, documented use case would be I think it was the Department of Prisons. What do you? I can't remember the name of
Corrections?
it. Department of Corrections. So
Mm.
they've the Ministry of Justice. Yeah, they've actually trying to take this process um, really seriously in the way they procure throughout the projects, and they've done some work with King's College London to document the the procedures and the outcomes. So I think they've achieved 20 to 30% savings in both money and time on their projects, and you know, and they've recorded all that learning, I suppose, as reports that the industry can refer to. So so there's definitely significant savings in both time and cost, improvements in quality, and out of all of that, the UK have created this thing called constructing the gold standard, which is is a new standard for building. Uh, Now that's not to say everybody's doing it in the
Mm.
UK.
Yeah.
um, like there's a lot of people that are hanging on to traditional processes for dear life. Um, but but I mean, change is slow. Like people don't like to change at the best of times. So
Oh, for sure. I
yeah.
guess you mentioned there a few moments ago, Ralph, that sometimes you'll have a lot of success in the pre-construction phase during the design process, and then it might come out to when you're on site. Contractors may not adopt to it as much as I guess would be liked. What benefits are in it for contractors to actually utilize BIM as a process? What would they get from it typically?
Well, let's just say if you have improved information, so if contractors work with better quality information and they can execute the work once without having to redo the work or correct the work or have delays or disputes or all these challenges, obviously there's a benefit to the contractor in just getting the work done and getting the job complete and moving on to the next job, and saving time and saving money and saving material costs and etc. So there's a lot of benefits, but of course, having said that, um, we also have to be mindful of how the industry operates. So for a lot of contractors, um, and I'm not saying it's their fault or whatever, but it's just the way the system is set up, is that to win the job, you have to kind of underbid the
Mm-hmm.
project. um, and then once you've won the job, the only way you have of making profit is to basically claim extra work through variations and delay, yeah, etc. So it's kind of the way the system is it's almost set up to not want efficiencies. Like you actually, as a contractor, what you want is inefficiencies. You want delays. You want corrections. You want rework because it's the only way you can
Make money.
make money as a So and so like I'm not saying that as an acquisition, like to accuse builders or anything. It's just the way the system is set up. Like the tendering process is set up to get the lowest price. Not it's not looking for quality, and and then like you're competing in that environment. So I mean, in a sense, you could say that's why BIM has been so slow to be adopted, because
Mm.
um, like the technology is not new. Like it was. I mean, it started back in the '70s, but it's been kind of mainstream since the 2000s. So you're like 25 years into this, and you'd think,
Mm-hmm.
well, why don't people use this? It's like a smartphone. I mean, like if you're still using a sort of landline telephone with
Yeah,
uh,
the dial up.
whatever, you haven't moved on when everyone else is moving has a smartphone in their pocket, which isn't really a phone even. Like your smartphone is more like a computer. Um, it's you hardly ever use it as a phone.
Yeah, that's
uh,
true. But although I'm a recruiter, so it gets plenty use from
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Um,
But I suppose what I'm trying to say is the technology is not being adopted because the system um, is not incentivizing efficiency. Yeah, the system is actually incentivizing inefficiency
that's what
because
I was actually going to ask.
yeah,
Pre that question. Because as you mentioned, contractors are bidding at as you mentioned, even less than 0%. Sometimes it can be 1%, 2%. So if it was a really efficient process, they know that they're going to make 1% on the job as a max, whereas they might be able to claim 3, 4, 5%. Throughout the project duration, which will build, I guess, top
yeah,
top top that up.
but that's only. I think it's really important to say that's only one point of view. Like another point of view that some, I mean, it's definitely the companies that we're working with, they have a different mindset. So they say, well, we have the system, not much we can do about the system, but if we can become far more efficient in the way we work, um, compared to our competitors, then not only can we win the job, but we can execute the job with a reasonable profit by eliminating all the wasteful things that we're not going to get paid for anyway,
Yeah.
or we're going to really struggle to get paid for if there's a long dispute around the variation. So the more that's a different mindset. So they're going in. The companies that we've been working with over the years, they're not doing. A lot of them are not doing it because they're told to do it. They're doing it because they want to do better business, for
Yeah.
themselves and for their clients. I mean, there's definitely some companies that are doing it because there's a mandate or there's an instruction. There's quite a lot of companies that are doing it reluctantly.
Hmm.
But the ones that are really benefiting are the ones who are doing it because they can see the benefit for themselves and for their end product and their customers. So they're the ones that usually do best because it's like I often use the example of building regulations. Like building regulations are a minimum standard. Yeah,
Hmm.
and if all you're doing is sort of working up to the minimum standard, then okay, you're staying out of jail, but you're not really delivering high quality. There's nothing that says you can't produce something that's of higher quality than the minimum standard.
Yeah.
And
That's a great point.
so some people look at the building regulations as a burden of, do I really have to do that? You know, other people say, well, I've exceeded. Like we do that and more because we want to build quality product, and you clients tend to go back to the second group because that's what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quality.
You
Quality
don't want
always
to buy
wins.
when you go and buy a car. You don't want to buy a car that's only meeting the minimum standard.
Yeah.
You want to
Absolutely.
buy a quality product.
So some of the we were talking offline, Ralph, about the global talent shortage. I guess universally in construction, but also within BIM as a process. So I mean, what do you see that as being a major challenge, or something that's maybe holding back the evolution within BIM?
Absolutely. There's I mean, you can talk to any company. The first thing they'll say, I mean, there's two things. One is the skill shortage; they just can't find the skills that they need. The second is materials and um, you know getting and price and inflation of materials. Yeah, and BIM is actually connected to both those things because the productivity of a person using a digital process versus an analog process is completely different. It's not like a 5% difference. It's more like 10 times.
Yeah.
um, and but also when it comes to material usage, the construction industry at the moment, because of its wasteful process, it probably wastes about 30% of material on site. So, like
Mm.
you purchase all this material, you transport it to site, you pay people to move it around the site, but 30% of the material leaves site again in a skip. Um, after all that, after paying for the transport, for the purchase, for the
Yeah.
handling, and then you're also paying for the skipping or landfilling of the material. So if you can work out the construction and the material usage at a much more granular, finer level in the digital model before you get to site, and you can reduce that 30% material, well, that makes a significant impact on
Bottom
material
line. Mm.
inflation shortage as well. So so there's a direct impact. But I suppose the digital skills, people have grown up in our industry, uh, you know, like me. I started with using a typewriter and pen and paper, um, and like you. Now, I suppose I was determined to learn these things, but there's been many people who have decided, for whatever reason, not to learn these things, not to become digitally competent. So, and I remember even maybe 15 years ago, when just before I left the job I was working in, one of our directors didn't use email. Like he basically had his secretary print out his emails. He would write the response.
Crazy. Yeah.
So certain people just haven't acquired the digital skills of working with technologies, even as simple as Excel and tables and databases and all the things that are involved in digital processes. And then when it comes to the production of information for buildings and BIM, which is this what I described earlier, this process of literally assembling a building in software in 3 dimensions and connecting that to quantity takeoffs and logistics planning, etc. People just haven't learned those things. They still got big sheets of paper on a table with a red pen, sort of, and
Yeah.
colored markers, and so people just haven't acquired those skills, and it's not something you pick up in 5 minutes. Like, you don't go from measuring a building with a scale ruler and highlighting pens on a piece of paper to doing digital quantity takeoffs in 5 minutes. You have to learn these things, and if you haven't been incentivized to learn because somebody hasn't said to you, if you don't do this, you're not going to have your job in 5 years, um, then you're just kind of stuck. So the skills gap is massive now. Of course, our universities and our schools are beginning to teach these things, which is great for the next generation. But we have a massive workforce of people who've just never got into these things,
Mm.
you know, and so we have to. So there's an issue of dealing with the skills at scale, like at a huge scale, and part of the problem is upskilling is not a big thing in our industry anyway, because of the fragmented nature of like um, sometimes as a, let's say, I'm just picking a trade, but let's say you're working on a project, like you're only going to be on that project for 2 or 3 months,
Mm.
and then you're off to the next project, and then you're off to the next project. So there's no and if there's no consistency in process across all those projects, then there's no reason to learn something new. If you can
Yeah.
just get by with doing what you did for 3 months before you get to the, so it's a very complex problem, because you need a consistency of process across multiple projects to create the incentive to learn a skill that will be applicable across multiple projects. Um, you know, and I'm not sure there's an easy solution to all that, but um, we underinvest because most companies are working at low profit margins. They underinvest in research, development, and training.
What country would you say has really championed BIM and maybe has done it really effectively? I think I mentioned during the show or offline that when I moved to New Zealand, Australia initially, when I started recruiting back in 2011, 2012, there was a real insurgency to or an urgency to become BIM compliant by, as you mentioned, 2016. So there was a real drive. And then I go to New Zealand and there's multi-billion-dollar projects that aren't utilizing BIM. And so there's different, each country has a different, I guess, agenda. Is at a different part in the life cycle of utilizing BIM as a process. So have you noticed any specific countries that are really, are really forward and are progressive in what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, different countries have done it in different ways. So for instance, Singapore as a country, um, their building agency adopted BIM quite early on as a like a central procuring authority and driving the process, right down to trying to use BIM in regulatory compliance. So when people were making their submissions for building regulation compliance, they were doing that through digital data rather than 10 printed copies of paper drawings.
Yeah.
Which is what we still do in Ireland. So when you make a planning submission, believe it or not, in this day and age, in the 21st century, when you make a planning submission to the local county council in Ireland, you still have to produce 10 printed copies of the drawings. And then the very first thing the council does when they receive these printed copies of drawings, which have all been generated by digital technologies, by the way, the first thing they do is they go and scan the paper drawings as a PDF so that they can put it up on their website. Like the whole process is just bizarre. Whereas in countries like Singapore, they've digitized that process. The Nordic countries like Norway, Sweden, they're quite advanced as well, and particularly around the government agencies like the Statsbur, they've had a BIM requirement. I don't know, it could be 2007. I'm not sure about that date, but it's very early on. But the UK government, I suppose, is probably the first sort of government who took an overarching position as a procuring authority. So, the government was saying, like, we're buying buildings and we want to buy this in a more efficient way because we want to utilize our taxpayers' money in a better way. Of course, they could only do that at central procured buildings, like ministerial buildings procured through the ministries. They couldn't really influence the local authorities, but at least they drove that from the top down. Other countries have been more bottom up. So I think Ireland, for instance, the industry actually responded before the government because I suppose the industry in Ireland recognized the UK as a major client, and companies who were working in the UK realized if we don't get up to speed, we're not going to be competing in that market. So it was really industry led, whereas the government have only announced the mandate in Ireland. It only started last year. So
wow.
we
10 years behind.
But anyway, it's still good.
Yeah.
Like there are not many countries in the world that have a BIM mandate. Probably about 10 I can think of. So we're not. I wouldn't say we're last on. We're not last.
Yeah.
But actually, I'd say a lot of the industry in Ireland are quite advanced because of this. Because a lot of Irish companies are working in the UK and working in Europe and working for sort of advanced clients. By that I mean, sort of pharmaceutical and maybe like the FDI clients, the data centers, and all these international clients, and they're working on projects across Europe that all have BIM requirements. So I would say the Irish market is a portion of the Irish market is very advanced in the way they work. Of course, there's many people in the Irish market that are still using the pen and paper and scribbling on the back of surveys, etc.
Well, that's just the way, isn't it? One of the things I wanted to chat to you about, Ralph, is your involvement in BIM Heroes, which is an online community that you co-founded. I've had a look at it, and it's a really interesting concept that what you've done there. So can you give me a bit more of and the audience a bit more of an idea of what BIM Heroes is about, and maybe what they would get if they were to join up?
Yeah. So the BIM Heroes community was set up specifically to address this problem of upskilling at scale, across the world. So we felt that the only way to do this was firstly to involve more people than just architects and engineers. Like we had to talk to quantity surveyors and project managers and clients and people who generally felt that BIM had nothing to do with them, and we had to
Yeah.
we had to say, actually, you have an important role in this orchestra, like you have an important instrument to play, and we all got to play this together. So the community was created to bring professionals together from all all walks of life, but also from different countries. So we want to learn from what's happening in different parts of the world, and we want to share what we're learning with other people across the world, so that the information can disseminate far quicker, um, and through this kind of knowledge sharing. And so there's three things that the community is trying to do. One is it's trying to be a community of practice. So we're trying to share actual practice, so going beyond theory and talking about this is how it works, or this is how it doesn't work. So it's a community of practice, of professionals in the broader AEC, including all stages: design, construction, operations, um, looking at all issues, legal issues, financial issues, um, you know, design, technical design, construction, manufacturing, technology and data governance. Like very want to look at the whole spectrum, and then get people to share knowledge, and so learn and teach, and at scale. So it's fascinating, because over the platform's only 2 years old now, and over the 2 years, the community has collectively created 10 CPD programs, um, and these are all freely available to people. So that anybody can come to the platform and um, access these programs, and we specifically targeted initially some of the key issues. So, for instance, just to go back a little bit, I was involved with a group set up by Enterprise Ireland, which is the Department of Trade and Enterprise in Ireland, called the National BIM Council, and we wrote a strategy report for the Irish government called the Roadmap to Digitization, and out of that study, we identified four key areas that needed to be addressed. So one was the issue of leadership. BIM wasn't being driven at scale across organizations and across the industry because nobody was taking the lead. Nobody was trying to understand this enough, and so we've developed a program specifically on developing leadership skills. And then the other thing was standards. So there are recognized best practices when it comes to this process. These are already, I mean, the UK standards that started back in the 1990s, the late 1990s, but they developed, and they're now at international standard level. So ISO 19650 is an international standard for the organizing and structuring of information. And but just because the standard exists doesn't mean everybody's using it. So this is part of the community of practice ideas. Like, we've got to teach people how to use these standards across the board, so that when you're a small company working on multiple projects over the year, that you're consistently following the same process each
Yeah.
time, and that'll allow people to, well, it incentivizes people to learn these things, but it also allow people to be efficient all year round. And so we did a program on the standards, and then general digital competency, as I mentioned earlier. Like, many people are stuck in their analog practices of the 1980s, 1970s, like paper-based processes. Even though, like, some people would say, well, everything I do is digital, like everything I produce is a PDF, but like a PDF is still a document that you have to open and look with look at it with your eyes. It's not something you can extract data from. What we need is structured data for digital processes. So so if people come along there, firstly they will learn, but if they have something to share, they can also teach, and the third part is we want to create a network, a marketplace network where you can find the best people. So if you're a company and you're looking for, well, if you're looking for staff, that's probably the best place to find the best people. But if you're looking for work, and you have particular skills, then the people you will work for are probably in that community as well. So it's to create those network connections. So that's
How many people are involved in the group, or how many members?
yeah. There's about 9,000 members at the moment
Well,
from spread across 120 countries, and yeah, and it's. I mean, as I say, it's quite a new group. It's only 2 years old, but it's um, yeah, we're growing, and and the idea is to get this knowledge that's been acquired across all these years to the market in general at scale.
and is there a membership cost or anything, Ralph?
There is a It's free for anyone to come to the platform and look at the content, so you can participate and learn. But we also have a membership fee for people who want to contribute to the building of the community. It's a
Hmm.
small fee; it's €25 a year. But as part of that, once you're a paid member, you actually get rewarded for everything you do as well. So you basically collect rewards. And part of the project is we're looking at new technologies like blockchain and distributed ledger and smart contracts. And so this is actually an exercise in establishing an organization using these digital technologies where the community the members of the community are actually, you could say, like part owners of the organization, um, and they get rewarded for everything they contribute to the organization, and
Mm.
and they become voting members. In other words, so when the organization makes decisions on anything, they will have a vote based on their shareholding or their participation.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had a look on it, and I'm part of different, various different groups, but it's really active, and
yeah,
there's a lot, that you can take away from it, learn from it, straight away. And as you mentioned, there's 120 countries, 9,000 members, so it's,
yeah,
it's different people, all walks of life. It's not just specific to one location.
yeah. Well, I think it's active because we're incentivizing people. So uh, basically, you in this decentralized autonomous organization, you get rewarded for what you contribute, and the rewards translate into reputation. So you get recognized and you get accreditation for all the things you do. But it also translates into voting power on the organization. So you're effectively like a shareholder of the organization, although it's not exactly shares because it's a new type of organization structure, but it's effectively the same thing. And then those rewards will eventually translate into financial incentives. So and that means people, they don't feel like they're giving away something for nothing. They're actually participating um, with a purpose. So
So
I
just sort
think
of coming towards the end of the show, Ralph, just wrapping things up. What's one thing that you would like to see changed within the industry? What's one thing that you would like to see I guess bettered?
I'd like, I suppose I'd like people to become more collaborative. I mean, we always say in our industry that we collaborate, and we do because people come together to build a building, and it's a fascinating. Like I'm fascinated by the whole creation of built infrastructure, of course,
Hmm.
but and we collaborate at a level, but it's often we're not helping each other. We're actually hindering each other.
Hmm.
um, and so yeah, I'd like people to 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 uh, to sort of trying to what's the word kill each other in business, and become more collaborative. Like I always use the analogy of an orchestra, or even if you're a sporting person, if you think of a team sport, while the players might compete for their position in the team, once they're in the team's actually playing together, and they're looking out for each other. But in construction, the design team are obviously are often at odds with the construction team, and they're trying to. There's a very adversarial relationship, let's say, between client, design team, construction team, and even within the construction team, there's a very adversarial relationship between the contractors and the subcontractors and the trades. So it's a very everybody's trying to do each other in, and it's, I think, what the technology allows us to do is to eliminate some of those issues that would occur in the real world, and find those issues in the digital world where it's cheaper and quicker and safer to resolve without having made expensive mistakes on site.
No, I love that. It's a great way to round off the show, Ralph. If there's anyone out there that may, for example, that might want to, become a member of BIM Heroes, or might want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, the best is www.bimhero.io. Is just join the platform. As I said, it's free to join and access and participate in. If you want to become a member, then that's you can do that as well. And there's added benefits of being a member, but it's open to anybody. And just begin to learn. I think that's the first step, and most people come there to learn, but then eventually they realize they've got something to give as well, so they begin to share. There's fantastic dialogue going on, and it's a very positive environment. Everybody is trying to help each other and share, and so it's a fantastic place to be. And then, of course, part of it is we have physical meetups. So we'll have a meetup in Dublin later this year in October. It's a conference. So we have an annual conference, but we also, because it's a global organization, we're looking at the moment of having meetups in the South Americas region and also the Middle East region.
Wow.
But so it's by connecting with people who are interested in this digital transformation, you elevate your career, you elevate your business, it's a good place to be.
Amazing. Well, it was a real fascinating conversation today, Ralph. Thank you for taking the time out to have a chat with me. If there's anyone that maybe wants to connect.
Before you go today, guys, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Can you please go to Apple right now or Spotify right now and just give us those 5 stars? Hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference you wouldn't believe. The whole idea of this show is to inspire, educate, and motivate our listeners. And we only do that if we're getting the best guests. The best guests want to see data. They want to see information. They want to see how many listeners that we get. And so all of this stuff is really, really important. So if you can just literally go and do that today, if you enjoy the show, just go and hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to continue to push this out there every Monday. So if you can, hit that 5-star button. And if you can't, even share it with a friend. Go on to WhatsApp, flick it on to your crew. Guys, thank you so much for listening. On to next week.